Well then. Do I deserve that my father did this to me? I lived like a robot for 2 years, working, saving, hoping to save my father from a terrible illness. It took me 2 years to save that money, do you understand? 2 years where I literally lived on instant noodles and water. 2 years where I denied myself everything because I knew this money was the only chance. A chance to save my father, Walter. Sounds dramatic, right? Like a cheap melodrama. But this was my life, my reality. I worked as a night shift nurse in Detroit, at a hospital where the salary was decent, but the workload was intense. 30 years old, no personal life, no proper sleep. I saw meaning only in those numbers on the bank account. Every shift worked, every penny saved brought me closer to the goal, paying for my father's experimental treatment at a Cleveland clinic. He got sick unexpectedly, something aggressive, rare. The doctors at our local hospital said they could only stall, but I found information about a new protocol that offered real hope. The cost? Astronomical for me, $100,000. I remember calling him that evening when I finally reached the full amount. That was 2 weeks ago. I was sitting in my small, smoky apartment, looking at the laptop screen where the desired sum was displayed, and I cried. Not from grief, but from relief. I did it. Damn it, was able to. Dad, I saved it. All 100,000. We're going to Cleveland, do you hear me? You're going to live. My voice was trembling, but for the first time in a long time, there was no fear in it. He replied very quietly then, choked up. Said I was his angel. Said he loved me. He promised that when he recovered, we would go somewhere together, anywhere I wanted. It felt so sincere, so real, that I didn't even notice the strange chill that ran down my spine when he asked me to transfer the money as soon as possible so we wouldn't miss the spot in the protocol. I immediately transferred it to his account. His personal account. It was a mistake, I know, but I trusted him implicitly. He said the clinic only wanted a bank transfer from his account for identity and insurance verification, some internal bureaucracy. I didn't question it, I was too exhausted and happy. I just wanted him to start the treatment. The next day, I took a week off to drive him to Cleveland, to help with the paperwork. He lived in the next state over, a 7-hour drive. I called him to let him know when I was leaving. Susan answered. Susan, his new wife. My stepmother. Impulsive, 10 years younger than my father, with a pasted-on smile and an eternal desire to live large. They got married 6 months ago, and I couldn't stand her, but I kept out of it. It was my father's choice. Oh, Eliza. How sweet of you to call. But Walter is busy right now. Very busy, darling. He can't come to the phone. Her voice was too cheerful, too joyful for someone whose husband was on the verge of death. I tensed up. Susan, this is urgent. We're going to the clinic. He needs to get ready. A short, heavy pause followed. I heard some background noise, something that sounded like splashing water. The clinic? Eliza, what are you talking about? Walter is perfectly fine right now. He's just relaxing. Enjoying life. We're in the Caribbean, darling. For 2 weeks. Walter said he earned this rest. I felt the blood drain from my face. The Caribbean? Susan, what are you talking about? Where is Walter? Put him on the phone immediately. I was already shouting, feeling panic constricting my throat. Stop it. Stop acting like a child. And stop calling here. Walter said you shouldn't bother him anymore. He said that money, well, it was a gift from his daughter. A gift for us, so we could finally take a break. He needs to relax right now, not think about your silly clinics. He's recovering here, she laughed. Harshly. Coldly. By the way, the beach here is just stunning. You should see this water. Okay, bye, darling. Walter's waiting for me for dinner. She hung up. I was left standing in the middle of the room with the phone in my hand, which was no longer making any sound. The Caribbean? A gift? $100,000 for a cruise with that witch? My father, who swore he was sick, who begged for help, who promised he would live. He just took my 2 years of life, my savings, my hope, and bought himself and Susan 2 weeks on the beach with it. Instinctively, I immediately opened Facebook. And there, in Susan's feed, which I usually ignored, I saw it. The first photo. Walter, my father, stood in white trousers and a Hawaiian shirt on the deck of a huge liner, hugging Susan, who was beaming in a bright pink bikini. He had a cocktail in his hand, and on his face was a wide, happy smile. No hint of illness. No trace of suffering. The caption read, "Best husband in the world." The surprise was a success. "Thank you for our fabulous trip, Miami, we're moving on." Miami. A cruise. He didn't just spend the money. He lied to me. He faked the illness. My eyes stopped at the publication date. This morning. Everything happened within those 2 weeks. He asked for the money, and instantly, without losing a minute, he bought this damn cruise. In that moment, I felt neither anger nor grief. Only emptiness. A deafening, icy void. It was as if my entire life for the last 2 years was not just a mistake, but a cruel, elaborate joke. I looked at my phone, then at my empty bank account, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't think about my father's treatment, but about the fact that I, Eliza, a 30-year-old woman, had just lost everything, and for what? So her father could fly to Miami with his new wife. This was the darkest humor I had ever known. I had to do something. I had to get that money back. But how? My mind was working too slowly. Only one thing was clear, this story had just begun, and I wasn't just going to sit and cry. The lies started unraveling faster than I expected. My so-called dying father left a huge, messy trail, and I realized how deep his betrayal really went. I had 2 weeks before he got back. The first few hours after that phone call were a blur of cold, controlled fury. I didn't smash anything, didn't scream, didn't even cry. The sheer shock acted like a powerful anesthetic, numbing everything except a terrifyingly clear, sharp focus on one thing, getting the money back. $100,000. My 2 years. I knew I had about 2 weeks. Susan said 2 weeks in the Caribbean. That meant I had a window. A very small, shrinking window to act while they were out of the country, unreachable, soaking up the sun using my life savings. First, I had to confirm everything. I called the Cleveland Clinic. I used the name of the doctor my father supposedly consulted. I spoke to the administrator. The conversation was brief and brutal. No, Walter Miller was not on any list. He was never accepted into the experimental protocol. He had called, inquired about the cost, and then immediately declined due to financial reasons. Financial reasons. He had the money right there, in his account, which I had just transferred. He lied to them, too. He wasn't even trying to get treatment. The illness, I realized, must have been exaggerated, or maybe even entirely fabricated. A cruel, elaborate ruse. The pieces started clicking together, forming a horrifying picture. Over the last few months, every call from him, every update on his deteriorating condition, every sad sigh, all performance. Oscar-worthy performance, considering the stakes. But why? I started digging into his financial situation, something I'd never dared to do before. I knew his address, of course. I logged into his email, I knew the old password, his dog's name and the year I was born. It was still the same. I felt a pang of disgust, violating his privacy, but that feeling was immediately crushed by the memory of the cruise photos. He forfeited his right to privacy the moment he stole my future. I found bank statements. What I saw made my blood run cold. It wasn't just the $100,000 I sent him 2 weeks ago that went into the cruise. His finances were a total mess. He was deeply in debt, credit cards maxed out, and there was a notice from the bank about an impending foreclosure on the house. The house where I grew up. He was losing it. And Susan. Susan seemed to be the main reason. Her spending habits were insane. I saw charges for designer clothes, expensive dinners, jewelry stores, and the kicker, a massive payment to a travel agency labeled Miami/Caribbean luxury package. That was it. My money went to save his ass from the bank and to fund Susan's lavish vacation. He wasn't just faking being sick, he was desperately trying to stay afloat and keep his trophy wife happy. He used my devotion to him as his ultimate lifeline. I remembered a conversation from about a month ago. He was on the phone, sounding weak, gasping for breath, telling me he had to pay a huge, upfront deposit for the initial phase of the treatment, but he was completely broke. He needed the money immediately, or he'd lose the spot. I believed him. I worked an extra triple shift that week. That was the lie that sealed the deal. It hurt more than the financial loss. It was the absolute demolition of trust. My father was supposed to be the one person in the world who would never hurt me. He was the stable ground. Now, the ground was gone, and I was in a free fall. I felt physically sick thinking about every loving word he said, every promise. They were all props in his carefully constructed deception. My focus sharpened again. I had to go to his house. I needed documentation, proof, anything I could use against him. I couldn't just call the police and say, my dad stole my money because he pretended to be sick. That would be a civil matter, a lengthy legal battle, and the money would be gone long before any court action took place. I needed leverage. I needed something he couldn't deny, something that would force him to transfer the remaining cruise funds back to me. I called my work and extended my time off, making up a story about a family emergency that required me to travel to the next state for an undetermined period. My manager, bless her heart, was sympathetic. The 7-hour drive felt like 7 minutes. My mind was racing, plotting. The hardest part was grappling with the moral dilemma that was beginning to emerge. Was I really ready to destroy my relationship with my father forever? Could I live with that? The answer, shockingly, was a cold, hard yes. He had already destroyed it. He chose a vacation over my sacrifice. He chose Susan over his own daughter. My obligation to him was over. I arrived at his small house in a quiet, tree-lined suburb. It was locked up tight. I knew where he kept the spare key, under a garden gnome named Gary near the porch. Another foolish detail I'd ignored before. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The house was empty. Eerily silent. The air conditioning was off, and the house smelled faintly stale. Susan's influence was everywhere. The place used to be cozy, filled with Dad's old books and fishing gear. Now, there were gaudy, brightly colored decorations, expensive-looking but tacky art, and shelves cleared of anything remotely personal from his past, or mine. She had already started erasing his old life, and now she was using my money to finance the final act of this erasure. I went straight to his home office. The old, heavy oak desk. I started pulling out drawers. I was looking for hard evidence, receipts, legal papers, something related to the house's foreclosure, or the initial transfer of my money. I pulled out a stack of loose papers from a bottom drawer. Most were junk, old bills, and insurance policy documents. But then, I found it. It was a prenuptial agreement. Dated 3 months ago. I scanned the terms quickly. It was extremely unfavorable for my father. It essentially stipulated that if the marriage ended within 2 years, Susan would receive a substantial lump sum payment, a guaranteed lifestyle maintenance fund, and the house, if he failed to meet certain financial obligations to her during the marriage. He was trapped. He wasn't just trying to make her happy, he was terrified of leaving her, or being left by her, and facing a financial ruin far worse than what he already had. The supposed treatment money was likely a desperate attempt to stabilize his cash flow and meet some clause in this agreement. I put the document carefully aside. This was a solid piece of leverage. But then I found something else, shoved deep into the back of a file labeled Taxes, 2024. It was a printed email. Not from him, but to him. From a man named Robert Vance. The subject line was chilling. Final notice. We are moving forward on the settlement. The email was short, formal, and devastating. It referenced an agreement to pay Robert Vance a settlement amount of $30,000 by the end of the month, or else, all details of the previous matter will be forwarded to local authorities. What previous matter? $30,000. A settlement. And a threat of involving the authorities. My father was hiding something far bigger and darker than just faking a sickness for a cruise. The $100,000 wasn't just for Susan's enjoyment, it was likely meant to cover this settlement too, to make a huge problem disappear. But he only managed to pay for the cruise. I stared at the paper, my heart hammering. The emotional shock of the betrayal gave way to a cold, calculated fear. My father wasn't just a deceitful husband, he was involved in something illegal or morally compromising enough to warrant a payoff to keep silent. This wasn't about a cure anymore. This was about survival, and he had thrown me under the bus to save himself from this previous matter. I took photos of the email and the prenuptial agreement. I had enough information now to start planning. I had about 12 days left before they returned. I had to find out who Robert Vance was, what the previous matter was, and use this new, terrifying knowledge to force the return of my money. The urgency was suffocating. The situation had gone from a family spat over money to something that smelled of blackmail and deep trouble. The moment I figured out what the settlement was for, I knew I was holding a moral hand grenade. I was now faced with destroying my father's life completely or losing everything. That's when I called the man who was blackmailing him. The weight of those documents, the prenuptial agreement and the threatening email from Robert Vance, was physical. I sat in my father's empty, sterile house, surrounded by Susan's tacky decor, and felt the walls closing in. This wasn't just about stolen savings anymore. This was about a total moral collapse and a criminal conspiracy my own father was entangled in. My mind zeroed in on the email. Final notice. We are moving forward on the settlement. And all details of the previous matter will be forwarded to local authorities. Who was Robert Vance? I used every trick I knew, starting with the most basic, a reverse email search. Nothing immediate. Then, I went through Dad's old physical files again, looking for anything related to a Vance or a settlement. I finally found a handwritten note on a crumpled piece of paper deep inside an old insurance folder. It was just a name, a phone number, and a date, our Vance, June 14th, $10,000 initial. June 14th was almost 5 months ago. My father had been paying this man for months. The payments must have completely drained his savings, explaining the foreclosure notice and his desperation for my $100,000. The realization was sickening. He didn't need my money for a cure, he needed it to buy silence and solvency. I typed Robert Vance's name into a broader search, combining it with the small town my father lived in. And then, the internet delivered the ugly truth. An archived local news article from about 9 months ago, buried deep in a community blog. The headline, Local High School Shop Teacher Resigns Abruptly After Anonymous Allegations. The article was vague, citing unspecified misconduct, involving a student and a subsequent internal investigation that was quickly shut down. The teacher's name? Robert Vance. My father, Walter Miller, was the principal of that high school for 20 years before his early retirement a year ago. I felt a cold wave wash over me. The connection was immediate and terrifying. Robert Vance was a teacher my father had worked with, and the previous matter was almost certainly this misconduct, this scandal. The narrative was clear. Robert Vance was accused of something serious, involving a student. My father, the principal, likely covered it up to protect the school's reputation, possibly protecting Vance too, or maybe just saving his own career from the fallout. And now Vance was leveraging that cover-up. He was holding my father accountable for his silence, threatening to reveal the cover-up to the authorities. My father's entire professional life, his reputation, was tied to this secret. $30,000. That was the final demand. He needed my $100,000 to pay Vance, stave off the foreclosure, and buy Susan a ridiculously expensive holiday to keep her from invoking that crippling prenup. He was juggling 3 disasters, and I was the easiest tool to use. The moral scale tipped violently. If I exposed this, my father wouldn't just lose his house and my money, he would face criminal charges for obstruction of justice, lose his pension, and be disgraced publicly. The local community, who revered him, would turn on him overnight. But if I didn't act, I would lose everything I worked for, effectively subsidizing a criminal's silence and my stepmother's lifestyle. I pulled out my phone. I had to create a scenario where I could get the money back without entirely destroying him. I had to talk to Robert Vance. My fingers trembled as I typed the number from the handwritten note. The phone rang twice before a gravelly, deep voice answered. "Yeah? Is this Robert Vance?" My voice was strained, barely a whisper. "Who's asking?" "I don't take calls from blocked numbers. My name is Eliza Miller. I'm Walter Miller's daughter." A long silence. I could hear him breathing heavily on the other end. Walter's daughter. Well, isn't that a surprise? I didn't know Walter had a daughter who knew about things. His voice was instantly calculating, wary. "I know about the settlement. I know about the $30,000. I saw your email, Mr. Vance. I know why he needs to pay you." I tried to sound steady, confident, but inside I was a mess. "And why should I care what you know, Eliza? Walter is the one with the problem. Not you. You should care because Walter is currently on a cruise in the Caribbean, spending the money I gave him for his cancer treatment. He's broke. The house is in foreclosure. He can't pay you, Mr. Vance. He's got no money left." Another silence, this one laced with frustration. "You're lying. I talked to him 2 weeks ago. He assured me the money was secured. He promised me the wire would go through by Friday. He lied to you, just like he lied to me. He only managed to buy a cruise. Check his bank account, if you can. The money is gone. Most of it is sitting in the account of Dream Escapes Travel Agency or something similar. He left for Miami 2 days after I transferred the money. He's trying to evade everything. He's using the 2 weeks to figure out how to disappear, maybe." I could hear the anger building in Vance's voice. He had been played too, though his predicament was clearly deserved. That selfish bastard. He thinks he can just leave me hanging. The deal was sealed. If I don't get the money, the documents go straight to the district attorney's office. You know what that means for him, right? I know exactly what it means, Mr. Vance. It means the end of his life as he knows it. And that's why I'm calling you. We can help each other. Help? You want to help your father? No. I want my money back. All of it. The $100,000. I worked 2 years for that. He stole it from me. I'm not protecting him. I'm protecting myself. And I know he has at least $50,000 of that money left, sitting unused, meant for the travel agency as a final payment. He's running on fumes. And what exactly is your proposition, Eliza? You want the $30,000. He can't get it for you. But I can. I can get access to the remaining funds he has access to, the ones he kept for himself and Susan. I have leverage he doesn't know about, the prenup and the knowledge of your existence. I can force him to transfer what's left, but only if you agree to a temporary ceasefire. You back off until he returns. When he returns, I will confront him. When he transfers my money back, say, $60,000, I will then transfer your $30,000 to your account. You get what you want, I get most of mine back, and my father's dirty secret stays buried. At least for now. He'll be ruined financially, but not legally. You get your money faster than if you go to the DA, because then you'll be waiting for a lengthy investigation that might not even pan out. The silence was excruciating. I knew I was playing with fire, negotiating with a blackmailer to save my lying, cheating father from a warranted criminal indictment. I was selling my soul to retrieve my savings. "You're a cold piece of work, Eliza," Vance finally said, a note of grudging respect in his voice. "But you're smart. You have the leverage. Send me proof. Send me a photo of that travel invoice he booked. Send me something that shows he's really gone, and that he actually has money left to pay me. I don't have the travel invoice, but I have the bank statements showing the massive transaction to the travel agency and the depleted account. I'll send you everything I found in his office that proves his financial situation. And I will send you a copy of the prenup, so you understand the severity of his situation. Do it now. If you're wasting my time, I promise you, I will ruin your father by Monday. And you'll be dragged into this mess as well. I want the money this month, Eliza. You have 10 days left to make this happen before he returns. The clock is ticking, and I don't care about your family drama." 10 days, I confirmed, my voice rock steady now. "You'll have your money, Mr. Vance. Just stay silent until I give the word." I hung up, leaning back in my father's expensive, leather office chair. I was now an active participant in a blackmail scheme, negotiating with a man who was likely a criminal, all to save the remains of my savings and, ironically, to save my father from facing justice for a crime he had committed months ago. I had to move fast. 10 days. The ultimate confrontation with my father was going to be brutal, but now I had a plan, and a terrifying partner in Robert Vance. I found the remaining money, but not where I expected. The truth about Susan wasn't that she was a gold digger, she was my father's jailer. And my new partner in blackmail, Robert Vance, suddenly went silent, making me realize I was walking into a trap. The agreement with Robert Vance hung over me like a guillotine. 10 days. 8 left now. I spent the next 2 days like a ghost in my father's house, methodically searching for the remaining funds. I knew he had to have a stash, an emergency fund, something he kept separate from the primary bank account that funded the cruise. He'd only spent about $45,000 on the initial travel payment, leaving around $55,000 unaccounted for, plus whatever he'd spent on the cruise itself. I wasn't looking for cash under a mattress. My father was meticulous, despite his moral failings. He would have an offshore account, or maybe a separate investment portfolio. I spent hours poring over his desktop computer, checking files, browsing history, and archived emails. Nothing. He was too smart to leave digital breadcrumbs for a large sum. I shifted my focus to Susan. She was the reason for all this, the architect of his financial ruin. If he was hiding money, it was probably to keep it out of her grasp. I started searching her side of the house, which felt invasive, but the line of acceptable behavior had long been erased. In her walk-in closet, behind a massive, overly expensive coat, I found a small, locked safe bolted to the floor. Standard home safe. I immediately knew the money was in there. The problem was the combination. I tried obvious dates, her birthday, their anniversary, my father's birthday. Nothing. I felt the pressure mounting. Vance was silent, which was unsettling. I'd sent him the documents, the financial proof, but I hadn't heard a word back. The silence was more terrifying than his threats. Was he waiting for the final deadline? Or had he gone to the authorities already? Desperate, I went back to the prenup documents I'd photographed. I read every line, every bizarre, controlling clause Susan had inserted. And then I saw it, buried in the section about her personal property protection. It listed a few pieces of high-value jewelry and a specific lockbox at a bank, but under the lockbox, in tiny print, was a 4-digit code followed by the word secondary. It was $1,119. I rushed back to the safe, my hands sweating. I punched in the code, 1-1-1-9. The latch clicked. Inside, there was no jewelry, no stacks of cash. There was a single, thin folder. And a small USB drive. I pulled out the folder first. It contained bank statements, but not my father's. They were Susan's. And they were from an account that had a shockingly high balance, over $200,000. The statements showed frequent, large deposits over the last year, all coming from a brokerage account in my father's name. He hadn't just been spending money on her, he had been systematically transferring his own assets to her, seemingly to protect them. But why? Then I read the letters. Not from a legal firm, but from a rehabilitation facility. Dated months before their marriage. They detailed my father's struggle with a serious addiction, an opioid dependency that had spiraled out of control after a minor injury. He hadn't just been sick in the last 2 years, he had been deeply, desperately addicted. The early retirement, the sudden marriage to Susan, it wasn't a love match. It was a lifeline. The documents outlined a strict, legally binding agreement. Susan was to manage all his finances, control his access to pain medication, and hold the deed to the house, essentially acting as his sobriety monitor and financial guardian. The prenup wasn't just gold digging, it was a cage. He gave her financial power so he wouldn't relapse and lose everything. He wasn't the master manipulator, he was a desperate addict under the thumb of his control-freak wife. She wasn't just enjoying the stolen money, she was managing it, controlling it, and making sure he stayed clean. The shock of this realization hit me hard. My hatred for Susan, the cruel stepmother, instantly fractured. She might be controlling, but she wasn't just malicious. She was keeping him alive and sober, albeit with extreme measures. My father had lied to me about his illness not to steal, but to conceal the shame of his addiction. The experimental treatment was a cover story for his sobriety. The only part that was undeniably evil was using my sacrifice to pay off the cruise and the blackmailer. I looked at the USB drive. This had to be the key to the remaining money. I plugged it into his computer. It wasn't encrypted. It contained one file, a fully executed legal document transferring ownership of his entire remaining investment portfolio, worth about $60,000, to an escrow account, with me, Eliza Miller, listed as the sole beneficiary upon his death. The document was dated 3 weeks ago, just days before I transferred my $100,000. He hadn't spent all my money on the cruise. He had secured his last remaining assets, $60,000, and silently bequeathed them to me. He must have known he was walking into a complete financial disaster he wouldn't survive. He was trying to protect me, his actual daughter, one last time, even as he was betraying me. This was the ultimate twist. He wasn't just a thief, he was a profoundly flawed man who was simultaneously ruining and redeeming himself. The $60,000 was the money I needed for Vance. But it came with a stipulation, his death. I couldn't access it unless he died. I had to act fast. I called the lawyer listed on the transfer document. He was shocked that I knew about it, but confirmed the details. The funds were locked. Then, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered it. Eliza? It's Robert Vance. His voice was low, conspiratorial. Mr. Vance, where have you been? You haven't confirmed anything. I found the money. $60,000. But it's in an escrow account, legally inaccessible until my father passes away. Oh, I know all about the money, Eliza, he said, a cold edge creeping into his tone. I've been busy. I decided to change the terms of our agreement. Change the terms? What are you talking about? You're a sharp girl. You found out too much. You know about the old scandal, you know about the settlement, and you know about the addiction. That makes you a liability. A wild card. You want the $60,000. I want the $30,000. But here's the kicker, the DA's office is already involved. My blood ran cold. You went to the authorities? After we made a deal? I had to. Your father's on the run, technically. And frankly, the story is too good to keep quiet. Your father covered up a child endangerment situation. That's a huge felony. But here's the new deal, Eliza. The real deal. You want that $60,000? You help me secure the evidence in your father's house. You give me the USB drive, and any other files you find. I'll make sure the DA sees you as a key witness, not an accomplice. And when the dust settles, I can pull some strings with the local attorney to help you get that $60,000 released from escrow early. We both know Walter Miller will be ruined, and he won't be in a position to contest anything. I stood there, the USB drive warm in my hand. He wasn't just blackmailing my father, he was trying to use me to secure his own position against my father's impending legal fallout. He was offering me a way to reclaim my money, but the price was actively betraying my father, destroying his life, and likely exposing Susan's role as his custodian. You want me to hand over evidence to send my father to prison, I stated flatly. I want you to secure your own financial future, Eliza. The clock isn't ticking for the $30,000 anymore. It's ticking on your father's freedom. He's due back in 2 days. The police will be waiting. You need to choose a side, and fast. You can be the loyal daughter who loses everything, or the smart woman who gets her life back. And remember that $60,000 is locked up tight. I'm your only key. The line went dead. I was alone again, facing the hardest moral choice of my life. My father was a deceitful addict who had stolen from me, but he had also tried to make amends in his own twisted, final way. Vance was a predator, a blackmailer who was now trying to coerce me into becoming an accomplice. My money was trapped. The confrontation wasn't going to be about the cruise anymore, it was going to be about his addiction, his cover-up, and his freedom. And I had 2 days to decide if I would be the one to send him to jail. I stood on the dock as the cruise ship arrived. I wasn't there to greet a father, I was there to meet a thief, a blackmailer, and a desperate addict. I had the USB, the phone number for the DA's office, and a choice that would define the rest of my life. The last 48 hours were the slowest and fastest of my life. The choice Robert Vance forced upon me, betray my father to secure my money, was a poison I couldn't swallow. But neither could I stomach losing everything. I had to find a third way, a way to reclaim my savings without completely demolishing the fragile structure of my father's life, broken as it was. I knew one thing, if the police were waiting for him at the airport or at the house, I'd lose my chance. I had to intercept him. I drove the 7 hours back to Miami, where his cruise ship, the Jewel of the Caribbean, was scheduled to dock. I arrived early Monday morning, the city already baking under the Florida sun. I stood near the customs exit, blending into the crowd of smiling relatives holding "Welcome Home" signs. My sign was invisible, written only in my mind, "You owe me $100,000. The feeling wasn't rage anymore. It was a cold, surgical determination. I had the USB drive in my jacket pocket, the one detailing the $60,000 escrow account and the transfer of his assets to Susan. I also had the phone number for Vance's lawyer. I was armed. The passengers started disembarking. It was a parade of tanned, happy people. Then I saw them. Walter and Susan. They looked disgustingly healthy. He was wearing a ridiculous straw hat, and Susan was draped in a colorful dress that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. They were laughing. A deep, carefree laugh that felt like a knife twisting in my gut. He looked nothing like the dying man who had begged for my help. He looked like a man who had successfully pulled off the ultimate con. I walked directly towards them, cutting through the stream of people. Susan saw me first. Her smile froze instantly, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated terror. She grabbed my father's arm. "Walter. Look." My father turned. His face, tanned as it was, went sheet white. The cocktail-induced euphoria evaporated instantly. He knew. He saw the look in my eyes, and he knew the game was over. "Eliza. What are you doing here?" "I thought you were working," he stammered, his voice losing all its false Caribbean cheer. "I took a break, Dad," I said, my voice quiet, flat. No screaming. No accusations. That wasn't my style. A well-deserved break. After saving $100,000 over 2 years to pay for your life-saving treatment, I thought I'd come and see how the experimental protocol was working out. Susan stepped in front of him, her eyes darting nervously towards the exit. "Now listen here, Eliza. This is family business. We'll discuss this later. You shouldn't be here. Shut up, Susan, I said, my eyes never leaving my father's. You're a large part of the reason we're here, but right now, I'm talking to my father. He flinched. He looked utterly defeated, shoulders slumped, the straw hat suddenly looking absurdly tragic. Eliza, I can explain. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think, Walter. You lied about being sick to fund a vacation, pay off a blackmailer, and stay out of jail for covering up a sexual misconduct scandal at your old high school. And you used my entire life savings to do it. Am I missing anything? Oh, yes. You also transferred your remaining $60,000 to an escrow account accessible only after your death. You betrayed me, and then, in a fit of twisted guilt, you tried to leave me an inheritance with money I should have had right now. Susan gasped. 60,000? Walter. What are you talking about? I managed your finances. I never signed off on that. She turned on him, her facade completely gone. This was the real Susan, the financial jailer. It was the only way, Susan. You were going to spend it all on your endless shopping. Walter yelled back, the confrontation erupting in the middle of the crowded port. You said you were paying off debts. You lying, miserable junkie. I keep you clean. I keep you out of the gutter, and you hide assets from me? Their ugly, public fight was my window. I leaned close to my father, my voice dropping back to that cold, clear whisper. Listen to me. Vance called me. He's going to the DA. You know he is. The police are probably waiting for you at the house. This isn't about your addiction anymore, it's about jail time and a destroyed legacy. I have the USB drive. I have the evidence of the cover-up. And I have the number for the attorney who can get you a deal. He looked at me, pure despair in his eyes. A deal? What kind of deal? The deal is this: you transfer the $55,000 that I know is still sitting in that primary account, the cruise change money, the last of my 100 grand, back to my account right now. You do it. And you sign a document giving me immediate, irrevocable access to the $60,000 escrow account, citing the extreme family emergency of your legal defense. In return, I don't give the USB to Vance, or the DA. I use the $60,000 to hire a ruthless criminal defense lawyer, the one whose card Vance slipped me, ironically, to protect you from the child endangerment charges, not the theft. You'll be ruined financially, but you might avoid prison. You will walk away from this whole mess with nothing but your clothes, your sobriety, and a criminal record, but you'll be free. I pulled out the burner phone and laid it on the customs counter. Call the lawyer now. He's expecting my call. He'll draw up the papers electronically. You have 5 minutes to save yourself from a disaster you brought on yourself. Your life, your freedom, or your money. Choose. He looked from the phone, to the screaming Susan, to my face. He saw no mercy, only a stark, impossible transaction. He realized he had burned every bridge, and I was the only grim, terrifying ferryman left. Eliza, how could you? I'm your father. He whispered, his eyes filling with tears. How could you, Walter? You took my life. Now, I'm taking the rest of your assets. That's the difference between a sacrifice and a consequence. He grabbed the phone. He didn't hesitate long. He called the lawyer. He spent the next 20 minutes in a frantic, hushed conversation, signing digital documents and transferring the remaining $55,000 back to my account via a mobile app. Susan stood by, shrieking about her rights until a customs officer quietly moved her away. By the time he handed me the phone, my bank app showed the funds had arrived. My $100,000, minus the cruise ticket money, was back. And the lawyer had confirmed the new, accessible escrow agreement. I had not only recovered my savings, but I had secured my father's last remaining $60,000. I was financially whole, and then some. I looked at my father, who was now a trembling wreck. He had lost his wife, his dignity, and his entire future in one morning. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the USB drive containing the evidence of the scandal, and dropped it into the nearest trash receptacle. The evidence is gone, Walter. The lawyer is on your case. Now go. You're free to go, but you're alone. I'll take care of the paperwork from here. I walked away without looking back. I left him standing there, a disgraced, financially ruined man, choosing to face his legal disaster rather than his screaming wife. I had won the money, but I had completely lost my father. A month ago, I was a heartbroken daughter scrambling for a cure. Today, I was a wealthy woman who had successfully navigated blackmail and betrayed a father to survive. As I drove out of the humid chaos of Miami, the philosophical question wasn't about the money. It was about the cost. Did saving my finances, and even his freedom, justify the brutal, unforgiving price of sacrificing the last shred of my belief in family? The answer was a chilling silence. I had my life back, but a piece of my soul was left back on that dock. And I knew, deep down, that I would never be the same again. The story of Walter Miller was over, but the consequence of his betrayal had just begun for Eliza.